Hi, welcome to another episode of Faith 234. Today I'm grateful that my wife hasn't kicked me out of the house because the Spurs beat Forest today, so she's still letting me stay here. But if Forest gets relegated, then I may be knocking on one of your doors for housing. Thanks. We'll see how that goes. So today we're going to cover Jacob chapters 1 through 4. We missed a week because of Easter. And this week was also General Conference, so I may add some things from that as well. So we're going to start in Jacob chapter 1, verse 17. Lisa wants to mention that.
I really liked where he talked about he had come up to the temple to teach, having first obtained his errand from the Lord. So he was there teaching what the Lord had told him to teach. And you know, I'm sure that we have all been given callings that we didn't feel qualified for, or we were asked to teach a lesson that maybe we were uncomfortable with, or we were afraid those hearing it might be a little bit uncomfortable with it. And that's the situation that Jacob was in. But he had the faith to do it. He was on the Lord's errand. He had the Spirit with him and was able to teach the things that he needed to teach. I think the one that I felt most unqualified for was when I was called to teach seminary. But I knew, even before I received that calling, that it was something that the Lord wanted me to do. And even though it was hard, it was probably the most, it was a life-changing calling for me. And so I think there are going to be times when we're asked to go on the Lord's errand that it might be uncomfortable or hard, but if we do it, we'll be blessed for it.
And she was a great seminary teacher too, so I can vouch for that. And then the reason Jacob was struggling with that is because of the topics he was impressed or commanded to teach. And one of them comes up in chapter 3 after he's kind of touched on pride and the law of chastity or morality. He compares the Nephites to the Lamanites, and then in chapter 3, verse 6, he says, "Wherefore, because of this observance and keeping this commandment," so the Lamanites were good husbands, good fathers, good family people, "the Lord will not destroy them, but will be merciful unto them, and one day they shall become a blessed people." And so it would have been easy, you can see kind of why the Nephites were judging the Lamanites, or may have judged them as completely wicked because they weren't obeying all the commandments. But this one very important commandment they were obeying, and that was going to bless their children and future generations that eventually would come around. And one thing I've kind of struggled with in my life is just prejudging people. I'll see people, you know, how they look or what they say, or, you know, just where they come from or something like that, and kind of place them in a certain box. But once you get to know them, sometimes you feel, oh wow, these are really good people, really honorable, righteous people, whatever. And it's something that I think is just human nature to judge people. But it's something I've needed to work on and try to accept people or see people more for who they really are, based on what they do or their actions or their love for other people or love for God, rather than what I perceive they're doing. And maybe they are doing something wrong, or not obeying one commandment, but they may be living 12 other ones, and that's, you know, better, or that outweighs the one that I'm judging them on, that they're not living correctly by. So don't judge people. So give them the benefit of the doubt.
It made me think of a talk that Elder Uchtdorf gave a few years back, where one of the things he said was, don't judge me, or don't judge people because they sin differently than we do. None of us are perfect. We all have shortcomings or things that we're working on, and just because someone has a shortcoming that's different than ours, we shouldn't judge, because the Lord can see their heart, and we need to try to view them as the Lord does.
Yeah, and more judge ourselves, try to look inward more of how we can improve, rather than judging how we perceive other people can improve. So and so all of this effort, this work of, you know, that Jacob's telling the people, he comes around in chapter 4 talking about the restoration of all things, right? Yeah, that there will be a restoration. So you wanted to comment on that?
I liked where he said, reconcile yourselves
Reconcile, that's what I was thinking of.
unto God through Christ and his atonement. And someone mentioned today that in order to be reconciled, we had to have been in harmony with them to begin with, unified. So in the pre-existence, at some point, we were in harmony with our Father in heaven and his plan. And through the fall and mortality, then maybe we have become, disunified, not in harmony with that, but we need to reconcile ourselves to him through Christ, his Son, and that we can obtain that glorious resurrection.
And then in 12, when he talks about the resurrection, I was getting ahead of myself. Jacob talks about having that through Christ we have a knowledge of a resurrection and the world to come. And we can have our testimony of the atonement and the resurrection, but that hope in the world to come. And Jacob separates that. It is something different, something unique, and more than just the atonement and the resurrection we'll receive, implying that what we're going to learn or experience there is going to be marvelous. And all our questions, doubts, fears, whatever will be answered and taken care of. But I just kind of like that just caught my attention, that we'll have a knowledge of a resurrection. And he didn't end there, but he said, and the world to come, which just implies that, but there's even more beyond the resurrection that we just need to hold on to and hope for as well. So, okay. He also, a little bit later on, he talks about looking in verse 14 about looking beyond the mark. Did you want? Or weaknesses. Do you want to go back to weaknesses?
In verse 7 he
yeah.
talked about the Lord shows us our weakness. And this has been pointed out a couple of places here and in Ether where it talks about weakness. Not necessarily weaknesses, but just that the Lord gives us weakness so that he can show us, so that we will know that it's by his grace that we were able to overcome them and have the power to do the things that he's asked us to do. So somebody talked about it in conference today too, about the opposition in all things, how in order to have the good we have to have, if we have a strength, there has to be a weakness to overcome. And so I just thought that was really good, that God has given us weakness, overall weakness, so that his grace can be made known.
Yep, I like that. And you can see Jacob going back to the blessing Lehi gave him in chapter 2, where he talked about opposition in all things. I think that's just kind of neat how he's bringing some of those things up in his own writings that he learned from his father back there. So, well, I just want to. Oh, we've got a little bit more time. So, okay. So looking beyond the mark, he warns about that. Trying to make more out of the gospel than what there is, or trying to extend the commandments to maybe make yourself feel more righteous because you're living them better or more completely, or even just making up commandments or signs of obedience that really aren't there. And that's kind of what the Jews did of old. They were so much on the letter of the law that they kind of overlooked the spirit of the law. So, do you want to comment on that?
Well, I just really like that in 14. It says, the Jews were stiff-necked people and despised the words of plainness and killed the prophets and sought for things they could not understand. And so it says, then so God took away the plainness and he gave them the things that they could not understand, and it made them stumble. And they didn't recognize Christ. It says they rejected the stone upon which they might have built their safe foundation. So by looking past the mark, seeking for things that they didn't understand, they didn't recognize Christ when he came.
And Elder Bednar in his talk, this conference, pointed out that the foundation that we build upon is not Christ. It's our foundation. We're building upon the stone, the rock of Christ. And that, like with the Jews or with anybody, that foundation can crumble if we do look beyond the mark, if we get too prideful, or if we're not obeying the commandments. So our foundation, it's our foundation that connects us to the rock or stone of Christ. And we need to build that, and it can't crumble, but it can also get stronger and stronger. So we need to continually be doing those things to build it. And I know that's true. And we've all seen that, where people who've led up on that, on doing those primary answer things, have lose their testimony. And somebody referred to in conference today that once you stop doing those, your testimony, I think they were referring to something that Nelson said, how quickly your testimony can dissolve once you stop doing those little things. So, anything else to add from Jacob?
No, I think that's it. Just keep our focus on Christ and His gospel, and just continue to strengthen our foundation and our testimony of Him.
Yeah, and avoid pride. So, I think it was President Benson's classic talk on pride pointed out that really the root of pride is enmity. It causes you to feel better or hatred, or just putting down other people because they have less than you, or you think you're better than them. So it's really the opposite of the two great commandments. That's why pride is so such a bad thing, because it can really erode away any love that you have for other people and for God. So one of the talks I liked from conference was Mark Pace, the general president of the Sunday school. He talked about the Book of Mormon, and this year, since Come Follow Me, we're studying the Book of Mormon. He just talked about his testimony and how his mother at a young age challenged him to read the Book of Mormon. And it made me feel bad that, I never kind of asked you guys questions or challenged any of my children, about their, what they're doing to strengthen their testimony. Sorry about that. But when I got to seminary and read the Book of Mormon and developed that testimony, or that's when I first developed my testimony, and it's been with me ever since, and it's grown stronger. And it really is the keystone of my testimony, because everything else kind of extends from that. My relationship with Christ, my belief in the restoration of the gospel, and all of that involves as well. So I really have a testimony that daily study of the Book of Mormon is critical to our spiritual survival and building a testimony and coming closer to our Savior, which we all want to do. So read the Book of Mormon. Anything else?
I just, looking back on those years that I taught seminary, and the difference between reading the Book of Mormon or reading the scriptures every day and actually studying the scriptures every day, and what a difference that made in my life. So I think that's where my testimony really took off and was strengthened. I think I've had a testimony, but those years made such a difference in my life where I actually put in the time to study the scriptures.
Excellent point. Yes, more than just reading it, studying, praying, pondering about it. So lots of good stuff in there. So, okay. Sorry we missed last week, but glad you're listening this week. And go Spurs. No. All right. So.
All right. Keep the faith.
And keep the commandments.
Love you guys.
Love you guys. Bye.